Hey, it's Amy Scott Grant, your favorite spiritual ass kicker. And I want to tell you something that might surprise you, okay? And it is this: your perception of the divine, like whatever you call the all knowing, all benevolent essence of the universe, okay? You might call it the universe, the divine. Some people call it spirit. I call it God, but if you're a recovering Catholic like me, you may have an aversion to the word God because of what that entity meant to you growing up and how like oppressive that was. I don't have that perception of God anymore, so I tend to throw that word around quite a bit. But you can feel free to substitute whatever word works for you, right? Spirit, divine, universe, benevolent one. I mean, I've heard it, cupcake. I've heard it called all different kinds of things. But did you know that your perception of that universal entity strongly influences your perception of yourself? I mean, think about it. Like I mentioned, you might have watched my previous video on Are You a Recovering Catholic? Or you might be a recovering Protestant. If you're recovering from things that you've had to undo and unlearn from growing up inside an oppressive organized religion, then you probably have an unusual perspective of God or of the universe, right? And sometimes those old beliefs come in and start messing with you, right? So for example, I have had many recovering Catholic clients, like private one-on-one clients, who have had issues with male authority figures, right? Well, if you think about what it's like to grow up inside a patriarchal organization where all of the leadership, the vast majority of the leadership is male, like all the way up to the top, and even God is referred to in male pronouns. If you're taught that this is an entity that's like monitoring your every move and that you better be good or else you won't get this grand prize of getting into heaven, and that you have to repent and grovel when you have made mistakes or made poor choices or whatever, you can see how, like, if that's impressed upon you as a small child, you could see how that would affect your perception of authority figures, particularly male authority figures, growing up and going forward and as a grown adult, right? And even if you've left behind, like, oh, I don't really participate in that anymore or whatever, odds are most of your family is still drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Or the sacramental wine or whatever. But like a lot of times you're still around it, even if you don't mean to be, or even if you don't intend to be. And if you haven't healed that stuff from the past, then it can definitely be affecting the way that you're moving through life today. So when you consider, if we just set that aside and we look at this from a more modern spirituality perspective, right? Like a non-denominational perspective. If you consider that we are all the divine, we have some describe it as having the spark of the divine. I believe it's a lot more than a spark in you, but everybody, I'm not here to push my beliefs on you or anything like that. I just talk about shit that I know is real. And if it resonates with you, then you're like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And it helps you and it assists you and it makes your life easier. That's really all I'm doing here, right? If you don't like it, you're welcome to go look at the hundreds of thousands of other YouTube content producers out there. But if this resonates with you and you have a more open-minded perspective on God and you're like, no, like the divine is like all benevolent, all loving, and it's like the universe is conspiring in your favor, and this is like a partnership that we're co-creating our lives, and that you can use certain spiritual tools or affirmations or whatever. But if a part of you is still like, but what if I screw up? Or if I don't do, this is a lot of times why when people start learning law of attraction, they're convinced if they can't manifest right away, they're convinced they're doing something wrong. Oh my God, I must be doing something wrong. I'm not visualizing long enough. I should have written out my affirmation statements 100 extra times. I missed a day of visualizing, right? Like, we try to make it like we're doing something wrong. No, that's not what's happening. That's your old beliefs, your old programming from when you were little saying must do this way, right? If you were Catholic, it's like sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand, kneel. Like there's so much ritual involved in mass and like everything related to Catholicism. And I know a lot of religions, I'm not like singling out Catholicism, it's just my personal experience. I know a lot of religions have tremendous amounts of, ritual and formation and things like built into them, right? But even though you might feel like you're leaving that behind and moving into more open-minded spirituality, you could still be carrying that old baggage with you. And if you have these old hidden perceptions around what the divine is, that's also influencing how you show up in the world. And things like, your worthiness and your ability to receive, which is a huge one for recovering Catholics especially, is being open to receive. Why? Because we were constantly taught that we had to be for other people and be for everybody else. This is why women get so freaking burned out, because we're running around taking care of everyone else. We're not practicing our own self-care because it somehow feels selfish to actually take care of ourselves. So we take care of everyone else, and who's taking care of us? Nobody, right? Because if we don't prioritize ourselves, no one else will. So I would invite you to think more about this, right? Think about like, what was your perception of God when you were a little kid? And what is your perception of the divine today? And what is in the past that maybe wants to be healed or wants to be resolved or let go of so that you can move more fully into this new perspective that you're holding? All right, so I hope that serves you well, and I'll see you in the next video.